Welcome, everybody, to the soul of the unexplained. I am your host, Jim Kelgard, and we are kind of doing things a little bit different here with this particular recap of Beyond Skinwalker Ranch. And as many of you probably have already noticed, Roger and I have not done a recap of this most recent episode of The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch. And the reason for that is that Roger and I have just been crazy busy. As I'm sure some of you that are Skinwalker Ranch insiders have probably heard about my recently announced participation in the upcoming music event at Phenomicon that will feature Dr. Travis Taylor, Jay Stratton, and Micah Hanks of the Debrief, and some other wonderful individuals. So, as you can imagine, folks, that's kind of taken up a bit of my week planning and getting ready for that. As well as a whole bunch of other just life kind of got in the way. So Roger and I regret that we have not been able to record a recap for episode 11 of season 5 of The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch. So because of that, folks, we are encouraging all of our subscribers and all of our viewers to go and watch Jeff Freeman's recap that he had of The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch. He did a recap of both episodes 10 and 11. And on top of that, he had Thomas Winterton as a guest. So it was awesome.
Amazing.
So we encourage everybody to go and check out Jeff Freeman's recap of The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch from this past week. And we'll put a link to that down in the description here for this particular video. But Roger, you're back with me. So excited to have you back in the saddle, as it were. We definitely missed you, and cannot wait to pick apart this latest episode of Beyond Skinwalker Ranch, which is episode 6. And it's yeah, we're gonna go into that rabbit hole. How you doing, Raj?
Doing good, thank you. I appreciate everybody that jumped in for me this past week. It's been kind of a crazy week for me too, and I will also say thank you in advance. I am actually out of the country next week on business. I will be over in Japan. So my good buddy here, Jim, and a few other insiders or whatnot and friends of our show will help cover me for next week because our time zones will just not align, and I will be there for work. So I will again miss next week, but coming back after that, really looking forward to jumping in and super excited today to talk about Beyond Skinwalker Ranch and the episode that it was. I think that there was, and we'll get into this, but I think that the area that they were in there merits more investigation, but we'll get in and talk about what that specific area is and why it would merit more investigation. So with that, yeah, let's jump right on in, Jim.
Fantastic. So the episode, folks, is called Tumbleweeds and UAPs. And again, this is episode 6 of season 2 of Beyond Skinwalker Ranch. And the episode begins with Paul and Andy telling Eric and Travis at Skinwalker Ranch that they want to go to an area known as Anza-Borrego, which is described as an underneath the radar kind of place that not many people know about. I certainly, Roger, had never heard of this place, and I consider myself fairly well informed on UAP type things. So this place was a new thing to me. But this location is roughly 50 miles northeast of San Diego. And Andy says that it has a long history of high strangeness and significant military presence. Andy goes on to say that it has a strong parallel with Skinwalker Ranch and that it has a history of cryptids and UFOs, and not just government activity, but a history of discrete or covert government activity. So things like black helicopters, nuclear testing occurred out there, advanced weapons testing, and so on and so forth. So Travis points out that the location, this Anza-Borrego location, is kind of right in relative proximity in between so many known military installations, well-known military installations, including Camp Pendleton, Miramar Naval Air Station, which of course is famous for Top Gun, right?
Yep.
Fort March, Fort Irwin, 29 Palms, and of course China Lake. And and that basically to the west of where Anza-Borrego is, out in the ocean, is also worth noting because that was where the 2004 Tic Tac incident occurred with the Nimitz, the USS Nimitz carrier group, again back in 2004. So a lot of interesting location as far as some of the military installations go to this location. So
Yeah. Really
and
quickly wanted to
sure.
point out, Jim, just really quick, that I think it's very important to note that this area is surrounded by a ton of U.S. military installations, um, because they do report in there that they see a lot of military aircraft and stuff coming through. And again, anytime you have a lot of military presence, there almost always follows, high strangeness, UAPs, UFOs. I just wanted to point that out, that if you're watching that episode, right, they show on a map and they pinpoint all these military locations around it. So I think that's something to consider when you're thinking about that area in general and why it might be as crazy as it is.
Most definitely. And so Anza-Borrego is actually, Roger, it's an actual state park in the state of California. And it's also, by coincidence, the largest state park in the state of California. So Andy then tells Travis and Eric about a phenomena that occurs out in that area that has been called Goldie, that seems to be reported more in the Anza area. And it's basically some kind of aerial unidentified object or phenomena that occurs primarily in the daytime, but in the nighttime as well. But uh, it's interesting and unique in the sense that most of the sightings tend to take place in the daytime. So Travis, of course, asks Andy, what does this Goldie thing look like? And Paul responds by saying that some people describe Goldie as it being a stationary light that appears, while others have described it as something that moves up and down. One way or the other, it's some kind of optical based aerial phenomena. So Paul and Andy will be joined in Anza-Borrego by Derek Hayes and Dave Flora, who created a documentary called Shadows in the Desert, which is about the Anza-Borrego area. And they themselves have had sightings out there with their own eyes during that investigation and production of their documentary. So Paul and Andy head out to Anza-Borrego, and they first stop at a place called Montezuma Valley, the Montezuma Valley Overlook, where they meet up with Derek Hayes and Dave Flora. And it's cool because the Montezuma Overlook kind of gives them a vantage point over Borrego Springs. And Dave and Derek tell them that it's kind of a centrally located uh, spot there that gives them a view of what is known as Clark Dry Lake Bed, where lots of secret military activity took place, and how the whole area is kind of a hotbed for Bigfoot or cryptid sightings, and of course, UAPs and UFOs. Derek and Dave tell them, they say that people see a lot of UFO activity in the area, which is very often followed by the presence of black helicopters and sometimes even fighter jets. While making the documentary in the area, they encountered many black helicopters that seemed to be investigating them and monitoring what they were doing. The narrator then goes on to tell us that in 1959, the University of Maryland partnered with NASA to create the Clark Lake Radio Observatory. This included a large radio telescope array consisting of 720 antennas that were lined up across the dry lake bed. And in 1979, NASA and the SETI Institute, which of course SETI stands for the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, they used the array to search for UFOs and extraterrestrial life. Now, worth noting is that this facility was dismantled and closed in 1986, and it left absolutely no trace whatsoever that there was any kind of installation or observatory that had been set up out there on the Clark Lake dry bed. So, a lot of the UFO reports in the Anza-Borrego area seem to originate and or appear to be landing in that dry lake bed area. The team then heads 15 miles northeast to Clark Dry Lake Bed to begin their investigation. So, Roger, let's just pause there for a quick moment and discuss that whole bit right there about how there's this area in Anza-Borrego, this dry lake bed, where you had both the University of Maryland and NASA teaming up in the late 1950s to create this radio observatory, right? They set up 720 antennas. And then, interestingly enough, in 1979, NASA partners up with SETI, okay? And they begin using those antenna arrays specifically to look for UFOs and to monitor potential extraterrestrial life. So, uh, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think the importance of that can't be underestimated when you think about what is, I guess, the phenomenology or the phenomenon that's going out there currently. You certainly have to take into factor that, you know, having that type of observation out there with NASA, and especially with the radios and the antennas, and they show that in the show. I mean, these are like these are huge constructs that they use to reach out. And you know, I can't tell you one way or the other. Did we hit a signal? Did we reach out and actually contact something that's in our known cosmos or whatnot? But it certainly piques my interest, and you know, cannot be underestimated or understated that the current things that people all around the area that are seeing that, whether that's Goldie, you know, other UAPs, the cryptids, the high strangeness, whatever paranormal events that are happening, I think that there's probably a good reason behind that. And you know, I would say there is probably a lot of energy left behind in that area, energy that may not be able to be detected just, you know, normally. I know they talk about that when they're looking like baseline and RF and things like that in the valley because it's protected by mountains. But with the amount of you know, communication radios that they were using, it leads me to wonder if there hasn't been some type of imprint upon that area. And who's to say that that hasn't been an invitation for the high strangeness and things that currently happen? It certainly warrants more investigation.
Yeah, it's my particular view when it comes to SETI in particular. I think I have generally what I would describe as an unfavorable view of what the work they do at SETI because it just seems to be mm, largely ineffective. I guess I would say because you're kind of assuming that if there's advanced civilizations out there, extraterrestrial life out there in the cosmos, that we're presuming that they would communicate with radio, and I don't know. I just don't know if that's the best use of resources with what they typically do. Now that's not to say that I think it's and I'm probably articulating this way wrong, but this one of the people that's attached to SETI, this Seth Shostak, prominent scientist who's been a part of SETI for a long time, uh, is one of these these guys that believes that there's no way that extraterrestrials have visited the Earth because the distances involved in getting here are just simply too vast. Um, and I think that's kind of uh, you're automatically cutting your legs off just because it doesn't fit into the current understanding of what's possible in the realm of interstellar or intergalactic um, travel.
Right.
You know, we just don't know. I mean, it could be. You would think that an advanced civilization wouldn't be using 20th century or even 21st technology to communicate, let alone to travel, right? So, especially considering some of the technology that we've seen on display with so many of these UAP and UFO sightings. So, I think it's interesting that SETI was brought in to work with NASA, but I'm also not surprised that they've not revealed any significant findings because I tend to think that NASA talk's a good talk, but I'm not really sure how much effort they put behind actually getting to the bottom of some of these things. And if I'm being honest, I feel the same way about SETI. I think the very large array down in New Mexico is really impressive. I think it's cool what they do. I just don't think that that's where the bulk of money should be invested in determining if there is in fact intelligent extraterrestrial or interdimensional life out there in the cosmos. And that's just Jim's personal bias opinion.
Well, no, I mean, I think that, as humanity, as we look to try different things and come up with theories, right? That's where I think some of our hubris or arrogance or self-confidence comes from, that we think we know what we know and we're defined by our own reality and rules. And you're right. Like, if there are interdimensional beings or extraterrestrials, right? I mean, we could be sending radio waves and we could be similar to ants, right? That are like sending out signals to, and humans are like, they're just walking by. It's like, oh, we don't
Yeah,
care. We don't know, right? Like, it's not,
exactly.
we don't hear what they're saying, so to speak. So I definitely agree. And I think we have to be a lot more, um, we have to be allow ourselves the actual flexibility to say there's more than one way to do this. There's more than one way to communicate, right? If you want to send out, like the radio communications, great, but that shouldn't be the be all end all, right?
Right.
You need to come up with other ways of, thinking outside the box. And yeah, again, I'm not a scientist. I don't, pretend to understand how they put this stuff together and what they're sending out and the stuff that they're getting back. But I do agree with you there that, if we are going to, as a society, especially in the US, spend tons of money um, to build these things, I think it should be done a lot more strategically and probably with a lot more consultation on how that money should be spent and what's going to maximize that return on the theories, the hypothesis. How are we going to prove or disprove, right? And you can't just use one source. So that's my 2 cents.
Well said. We're kind of the same mind on that. And so yeah, so well diving back in here, uh and it is worth noting the involvement at one point of NASA and SETI in this area. But so Paul and Andy are immediately impressed by, for one thing, the size of the lake bed, and they decide to get their spectrum analyzer to get some baseline readings, as you mentioned a moment ago, Roger, and also to check for any potential anomalous radio signals. They're specifically looking for signals in the 1.4 to 1.8 gigahertz range. And they detect no radio signals at all there from the dry lake bed, which hold on to that thought, folks. So Derek and Dave talk about how their sighting was there in the dry lake bed area. And what they saw was like this large array of lights. And I don't know about you, Roger, but the image that they showed looked almost like Starlink,
Yeah.
but it was on the ground, so it clearly wasn't Starlink. But that same kind of thing where you had several lights that were lined up in a line, basically. But it was a real interesting looking picture. I definitely recommend folks obviously watch the episode to get an idea of what we're talking about there. But Paul and Andy then mentioned that they're going to bring the Secret of Skinwalker Ranch alum, Dave Mason, out to the area to help them monitor the area for activity with his imaging technology. Now, Dave Mason, if you'll remember, Roger, is a tech expert and has invented many devices that detect and interact with anomalies. And he was again on Skinwalker Ranch, The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch, in season 4, I believe, when they had Blazing Bear, or shortly thereafter, and it was Dave Mason's thermal imaging that captured the rocks on the mesa heating up at certain points and capturing several UAPs in the process as well. So Dave Mason says he's brought high resolution FLIR and then a new FLIR device known as a differential FLIR, which gives them a lot of different ways of looking at temperature changes rather than just using the conventional FLIR. So the differential thermal FLIR is a modified thermal camera that enhances minute changes in thermal energy, which can help to identify phenomena not visible to the naked eye or conventional thermal cameras. And specifically, when looking at these thermal cameras, the colors red, yellow, and white represent hotter temperature changes on the camera, whereas purple and dark blue colors show colder temperature changes. And so Paul and Andy will be using a spectrum analyzer and, of course, their AI-powered UFO or UFO DAP, UFO DAPs, not DAB, DAP, right? So there you go, Roger. So right away, something starts draining their batteries as soon as they turn all the equipment on. And even their solid state batteries are mysteriously getting drained. So they begin relying on their cars, their vehicles, to recharge the batteries and to power up the equipment. They start their tests and very quickly detect a signal in the 1.6 bandwidth. So they decide to start pointing an antenna, I don't know if it's like a Yagi antenna type thing, but in a clockwise motion to determine where the signal is coming from. They then determine that the strange signal is originating from the same spot where Dave and Derek saw and filmed their UAP encounter in the Clark Dry Lake bed. Andy points out how it was previously a dead area for radio signals earlier in the day. When they took their baseline readings, there were no signal readings at all. And now this same area is pulsing with 1.6 gigahertz frequency.
Crazy, right?
It really is. And the differential FLIR then shows a large temperature increase in that same area. Dave Mason then points out how the same thing happened at Skinwalker Ranch. Just then, Roger, everything died. All of their equipment, just including the cars, just completely shut off.
I know. Yeah, they're done.
And so we're talking mechanical and electrical failures. Just then, as this equipment fails, a large, bright orb-like UAP appears close to the ground in the lake bed where there are no roads and it's extremely muddy ground. And the orb then simply, makes its way up the ridge and fades out and disappears on the opposite side of the lake bed. So, Roger, we're going to pause here for a moment and discuss. For me, the big thing in that was not just simply detecting the radio frequency when earlier in the day there was none detected in their baseline reading gathering data, but what really drives the whole thing home for high strangeness is that it shuts down not just all their software and the computer stuff that they have set up, like the spectrum analyzer and the UFO DAPs, it shuts down the cars that are powering them. WTF, Raj?
Yeah, I have no explanation for it. It's really weird. And so again, you think about that 1.6 gigahertz signal and that I guess that range, and it's supposed to be Earth to satellite, satellite back to Earth, military communications. And I can't rule out the possibility that they were being monitored by our military, something potentially beyond our military or whatnot, to have the power that just knocked out like everything right there. And you've got, because to your point earlier, there were no signals. The baseline, it was just quiet. It was, you know,
Right.
peaceful thing. And then all of a sudden you start picking this stuff up, and then they get the battery drains and the cars are shut off. And like, you know, it, one thing that is really interests me out beyond Skinwalker Ranch is that there's more, they break that fourth wall a little bit more. And so you do talk to the producers and stuff. And they seemed, at least to me, that especially when everything shut down, the cars and all of that, um, the producers, the cameramen, they were stunned. They were very perplexed. Like, what just happened? They weren't even able to explain it. So again, I think in that show, that was a definite WTF moment. What would cause that to have I mean, they're generating a lot. It takes a lot to take a car down. I mean, that's a pretty powerful engine, battery, you know. My guess is that these are newer vehicles. It's not like they're coming in there with 1950, engines and batteries by any means. But
Right.
yeah, I don't have an explanation for it other than if I were in their shoes out there and having that type of experience where none of my equipment that I'm using to rely on and to get out of there, right? If I needed to
Yeah.
get in my vehicle and exit and right, that
Yeah.
that would scare me. That would freak me out.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it's not out of the realm of possibility that they could experience a complete electrical and mechanical failure like that. But as we've seen so often, it seems to be too much of a coincidence to be anything other than something truly anomalous and strange. And it behaves like it's an EMP because it shuts down everything electrical, but yet at the same time, an EMP doesn't just simply kill all electrical signals, it also completely fries it. And that clearly wasn't the case because they were able to get the cars restarted, they were able to get the systems back up and running. So um, to me, it just seems a classic case of what we see on Skinwalker Ranch, where maybe some kind of technology or entity, whatever you want to call it, is just flexing a little and saying, "Hey, we're here, we're watching, we're aware of what you're doing." So to me, that was a definitely one of the more interesting moments of this particular episode. And so the next day, the the team the team goes meets up in Borrego Springs to review the findings from the previous night's investigations. And Dave Mason then shows them several UAPs appearing on the differential FLIR that didn't register on the conventional FLIR. And the objects were moving relatively fast and seemingly in unison or in synchronization with each other. Dave Mason then says that the objects shown up had the objects shown up on conventional FLIR, he'd likely attribute them to being high altitude aircraft. But because it wasn't detected on the conventional FLIR, he can't explain what these UAPs are. Dave then shows them another differential FLIR capture with two more UAPs near the top of the ridgeline that are also moving in sync or in tandem with each other. Derek and Dave, the filmmakers, then recommend that Paul and Andy meet up with Roland Vilanowith up in Anza. So, Roger, just real quickly, let's just dissect what Dave Mason then what he shows them the day after, where he presents them with the conventional FLIR footage, which doesn't show essentially jack shit, right? And
Right.
then this differential FLIR, which is a much more advanced thermal imaging that shows anomalies that not even the conventional FLIR camera picked up on. I think that's really fascinating and interesting. How about you?
Yeah, yeah. It's so with the differential FLIR, what is I think incredible about that is that it's measuring ongoing temperature changes. So instead of, with a regular FLIR, you're pretty much seeing what's static around there, and you now have these unidentified objects, so to speak, within that differential FLIR that are changing temperatures and moving, and some of them seem to be in sync with each other, right? And so, like, man, talk about what's going on in a visual spectrum that we with our eyes cannot see. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah, and that's what we see on The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch all the time is that when we have access to this technology that allows us to see into the electromagnetic spectrum or into the light wave spectrum, what our eyes cannot naturally see is that there is what appears to be an abundance of activity that's going on. These UAPs, these objects, these you know things that we just cannot see with the naked eye, and it makes you wonder: are these things around us, literally everywhere, not just out on Skinwalker Ranch or some of these other locations, but are these things that could conceivably be in the sky or in the environment around us all the time? And I think you have to answer that with, at the very least, a solid maybe, right?
Oh, yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So Paul and Andy, they then, the team moves 30 miles to the northwest to a location known as Thomas Mountain Overlook, next to the town of Anza, and to investigate a legendary light phenomena, again, that is frequently cited by the locals that they call Goldie. Now, because most of the Goldie sightings happen during the day, the team decides to conduct their investigation during the day as well. They're joined by Roland Villanoweth and his daughter, Lauren Hohenbaum, at Thomas Mountain Overlook. Roland and Lauren tell Paul and Andy that the area they're currently situated in is where most of the Goldie sightings occur. As soon as they start recording, they see what else but a helicopter in the sky that seems to be observing them. Now, here's where it takes an interesting turn, Roger. It's a Bell 505 Jet Ranger helicopter, privately owned, with no declared destination, according to the FAA tracker that Paul and Andy have. Furthermore, the tail number of this helicopter is recycled, which means it's been previously been assigned to not another helicopter that was retired, but rather to a fixed wing aircraft that was retired from service. And that is just not a regular procedure of happening. Usually, if you're going to retire a tail number from one helicopter that's taken out of service, you then move that tail number to another helicopter, and helicopter and fixed wing aircrafts are different in that regard. And so the fact that this happened really kind of makes you take up and notice. And so Roland then tells them that people that witness events like Goldie sightings, that these sightings are often accompanied by the appearance of black helicopters. And this particular helicopter that they just saw, this Bell 505 Jet Ranger, didn't stick around for long, Roger. It wasn't like it, hovered
Right.
around and was keeping an eye on him. So they start recording again, and immediately they start getting a signal at 1.55 gigahertz. They up the detection signal to 1.56, and all of a sudden, a big signal appears. A very complex signal appears on their spectrum analyzer. So they do a 360-degree antenna sweep to determine where that signal is coming from. and it's determined that the signal is possibly coming from beneath them. They also detect temperature changes with the FLIR. So, Roger, let's kind of unpack that and then wrap up this episode. Again, are we talking about just a coincidence that this black helicopter suddenly appears as they start turning on their equipment, and then they're able to determine from their FAA tracker that this particular helicopter is using a registered tail number that was for another aircraft that was taken out of service, but a fixed wing aircraft and not another helicopter? I mean, that right there has got to throw up some kind of a red flag of some kind. Am I wrong?
Yeah, that's a huge red flag because that one, I mean, we already know if you're swapping your vehicle license plates out with, somebody, whether they're stolen, unregistered, or whatnot, to conceal your identity, it's illegal. And I would assume that having that swapped out, so it's not even traced back to a helicopter, but a plane. That's definitely a huge red flag of one, why would somebody do that if not to be in some way covert, deceitful, right? And what were they doing there? Because they said, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was a pretty much nondescript black helicopter. There wasn't any markings or anything. I mean, it was transmitting the responder, but no, as you stated, no flight data. And so what was the purpose of being there? And it definitely goes along with all the reports there of seeing black helicopters, seeing military planes, seeing things that you just normally, when you're out there, you don't see. And again, Dr. Travis Taylor said, and if you've watched The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch, they've had crazy people show up all the time through the air, whether it's military or unidentified aircraft that shouldn't be there, that's not responding. They don't have, you know, everything's been concealed. So again, high strangeness. It makes me wonder what the purpose of, you know, why somebody would be out there and what are they doing?
Yeah, I mean, it makes you wonder if maybe this is something that an intelligence agency would do to um, to have an aircraft that they repurpose a previously retired aircraft tail number, take it from a fixed wing aircraft, and then put it onto a helicopter, which two completely different animals here. Um, so it's odd, and it was also I think worth noting that this was a privately owned. This wasn't declared as a military aircraft or a commercial aircraft of some kind. It was, they said, specifically privately owned. Um, and again, just raises more questions and makes you wonder, was again this just simply the mere happenstance of some, guy that owns a helicopter just flying into the area, happened to be there at the same time that they are? Of course, that's within the realm of possibility. You have to say that it is. Or is it, something more suspicious that we have reason to be suspicious of? And quite obviously, that's an answer we can't answer that conclusively. But it certainly does lend a credence of additional strangeness to everything that is alleged to take place in this particular region. So, Roger, just tell us kind of quickly where the investigation goes from here, and then we'll wrap this up.
Yeah, I think that the investigation goes from here. They do when they're looking at that and studying the Goldie lights, they do have, they're using the FLIR cameras. Um, kind of sum up, they had what's really interesting is what you'd almost think of some type of glitch on the FLIR camera where um, something, and looking for the right words, but something happening that is making the FLIR not work correctly. But the strange thing is that the mountain that they're covering and where the, people have seen these lights and whatnot, only the mountain shows something that happens to it, right? It changes that color. The sky
Right.
above it and everything doesn't. So it's not like a full malfunction of that screen. And it happens multiple times, which is strange, because both Paul and Andy, talking to Travis and Eric later on, state that, they've been using these FLIR cameras, for the last several years. They've never had this type of thing. And the great thing is that they've never encountered this type of thing before. And the gentleman and the lady, and his daughter that they were with, you know, felt that what had happened was just, and more evidence and concrete, helped them feel better about what they've seen out there, and that there was at least some type of, more, I guess, evidence of something happening there, right? That could be tied to the Goldie incident or whatnot. But it's very, very strange that when you go back and look at it, that whatever, if there was a pulse or something was above them, below them, right? It specifically targeted that mountain, and it was just for that brief second, right? It
Right.
didn't it didn't take out the whole screen. It just did that specific geography, which is strange. Like, what would cause that? So was something that they couldn't see monitoring, sending some type of pulse out, whether as a communication or, trying to do something to let them know, hey, I'm here, or, I don't know. It was really, really strange to see.
Yeah, my thoughts in wrapping up the episode. I I won't say I was necessarily impressed by anything. The biggest moment in this episode for me was all the equipment, including the cars that were powering the equipment, being shut down. That to me was the most significant thing that happened in the episode, the most noteworthy thing. Um, the anomalous readings in the FLIR, the stuff that the differential FLIR captured in regards to UAPs, and of course the eyewitness accounts of both Derek and Dave, the filmmakers, plus Roland and Lauren, the two locals up there in Anza. I think the area deserves and merits further investigation. Um, we're seeing a lot of the same types of situations, particularly as it pertains to the 1.6 gigahertz, within that whole 1.4 to 1.8 band of frequency. We're seeing that in more places outside of Skinwalker Ranch, which then it begs the bigger question again: is that happening everywhere? Is that literally happening all around us, regardless of where we may be? I mean, here we are, Roger, in the Salt Lake City area. You know, 2-3 million people crammed into this Wasatch Front corridor. Uh, is this kind of stuff around us, even in a densely populated area like we're in, or in a place like LA or New York or Moscow or Rome or London or any place else in the world? I mean, is this something that is just environmentally, are these phenomena occurring literally all around us that we just simply aren't wise to because we don't have the necessary technology that allows us to see and detect these things employed in these other areas? But we're seeing with Beyond Skinwalker Ranch, if there's one thing that this show is doing, despite all my criticisms of some of the past things that we've talked about with this particular program and the manner in which some of it is presented, is that there is clearly appears to be a growing evidence trail of some of these same strange phenomena that have been detected on Skinwalker Ranch are in fact happening in other places, at least within the United States, right? The Bridgewater Triangle, Mount Wilson Ranch, uh, Thomas Miller Ranch, the Rocky Mountain Ranch. I mean, and now Anza-Borrego, which I had never even heard of prior to this episode. So I'm definitely intrigued. I definitely want to learn more and know more. I definitely want to go watch that documentary now that Dave and Derek did, because I do think, Roger, that there is more out there than we are aware of, that is happening all around us all the time that we just don't know, because we can't see it. It doesn't. It may be interacting with us. I mean, think of, here's one that'll get you thinking. Think about all these people that live out in rural areas that develop cancer. And of course, modern science tells us that cancer is hereditary. So if you have a history of cancer in your family, you're going to be more susceptible to developing some kind of cancer, uh, due to genetics, right? Well, what if maybe some of these cancers and other illnesses are caused by exposure to ionizing radiation, gamma rays, like we've seen happen on Skinwalker Ranch? Because if you're
Mm.
not carrying around a dosimeter or some of these other detection devices, you're going to be none the wiser that you may be getting blasted by something, that's there in the environment that you're walking into, or that may, in some cases, specifically be targeting you. Because we've seen it appears to be targeting cattle, right? We've seen that happen recently on Skinwalker Ranch. So I think if there is a case to be made for the validity of Beyond Skinwalker Ranch, it's that. Despite, my own personal criticisms of some of the aspects of this series, you absolutely cannot overlook the fact that they are uncovering a lot of similarities in incidents and anomalies that previously we've only been aware of happening with a degree of frequency on Skinwalker Ranch. And now we know there are other locations just within the United States. So imagine where else they may be in the world where there is really weird, anomalous shit going on that, I absolutely think merits further investigation. So while this episode may not have been as exciting as some of the previous episodes, I still got a fair amount of valuable information and data out of what they presented in this episode. So, but definitely interesting and definitely something I want to see more of in the future. Roger, how about you?
Yeah, 100% well said and agreed. That I think that it just shows that no matter where you are at in the world, there is high strangeness, and there are these places where, whether you have lore from the people and that have lived there for, centuries and centuries, or, even just modern day, you know, families and people just living life, things happen. And um, it's exciting to see, at least in our modern day age, where we actually can have shows such as, Secret of Skinwalker Ranch, Beyond Skinwalker Ranch, to start seeing some of these stories, some of these things that people are talking about that begin to start matching up, that there's similar phenomena happening in other places. Again, it's not happening in all places, but it's very interesting that when you do find places of high strangeness, that a lot of this stuff, and I guess the science that they're using and the observations, the evidence seems to point that there's a lot of connectivity here. I think we can learn from that. I think we can correlate that, what's happening on Skinwalker Ranch is happening elsewhere. I mean, albeit a little bit different, and how they're connected, or if they're connected, we don't know, but it's sure exciting to find out.
I agree. I mean, I've never been one of these bandwagon woo people. I guess that's the best way to put it. I'm not gonna automatically go and jump to the extraterrestrial conclusion that this is ETs interacting or visiting us, because unless the data clearly shows that being the case, it could be any one of a number of things. There could be a completely mundane and rational explanation behind all of this, right? And that's why you have to have an open mind. If you go into any of this saying, oh, I've already made up my mind it's aliens, or I've already made up my mind it's demons or angels, um, then you're kind of cutting off your nose to spite your face, because you have to allow yourself to consider the data and truly analyze the data. You've got to get those repeatable results. You've got to have, you know, the scientific method applied. And we've talked about it so many times, Roger. It's a process. It's a deliberately slow process to achieve that data so that not only can you form the right hypothesis and ask the right questions, but that you can also eventually verify or falsify whatever those hypotheses are that you form, to help lead you to an informed and educated conclusion on what some of these anomalies might be. So I am not a bandwagon believer. I am a healthy skeptic, but I'm open minded. I'm not at all a debunker. There's a big difference between a skeptic and a debunker. I just want to see the science that helps to lead to the extraordinary conclusions. And again, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And that's not to say that at all that I discount eyewitness testimony from experiencers. Being an experiencer myself, I know that a lot of times when weird things happen, strange phenomena happens, you don't have data to back you up. It's just a very singular incident that happens to you that uh, you know that it happened because you experienced it. You were there. You saw it. You felt it. Whatever the case may be, and you may not have video evidence or any other kind of uh, instrumentation or sensor evidence to back up your experience. But still, folks, we have to have that. And again, this is just the doctrine according to Jimm, if you will. Uh, I got to have that scientific data. I got to see that process that they're following to try to get the repeatable results, to try to form the right hypothesis, to see how an extraordinary conclusion can be arrived at. Because to me, this could literally be anything. It could very well be aliens, extraterrestrials. I'm not saying that it's not. I'm just saying that's not where Jimm Kelgard instantly goes to, because
Right.
it could be so many other things. And I would strongly encourage other people to do that. We all want so desperately to be the extraordinary conclusion, right? We want it to be aliens. We want it to be interdimensionals. There's probably some crazy folks out there that want it to be angels or demons. You know, Whatever the case may be, you have to follow the data, which is why asking the right questions and gathering the right data, doing the right experiments, and having the right people in place to gather and interpret that data is so crucial. And so, while Paul and Andy are not scientists of any kind, the fact that they are at least gathering data and then trying to pass it off to have other people that are subject matter experts like Dave Mason, like Pete Kelsey, and you know, then relaying everything to Eric and Travis, that's better than just simply having Dave or Andy say, "Oh, well, it's ETs," So you just had to say that, folks. Apologies for getting verbose again. So, Roger, closing thoughts and remarks.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you. I think that no matter what episode you watch, whatever show you watch, whether it's Secret of Skinwalker Ranch, Beyond Skinwalker Ranch, there's a lot of, documentaries out there around the paranormal, Bigfoot, etc. You need to be a healthy skeptic. You need to, it's okay to question. It's okay to ask those questions. It's okay to form opinions around things, but it should all be done with the mindset of, right, that you're seeking the truth. You're asking the right questions in the spirit of, I am seeking truth. I am seeking knowledge. I am not seeking to belittle somebody else. I'm not seeking to tear somebody else down just because I need my own ego to do it, right? Like you were talking about the debunkers out there, and won't name names, but it's horrible to see people treat each other that way. And again, a lot of people, and especially our listeners out there, if this is a safe space, a lot of people have had different experiences. Jimm and you and I have had very vast different experiences across lots of spectrums of the paranormal. Um, but that's what keeps us coming back, and that's what keeps us curious and asking those questions, and just making sure that we're not making those assumptions and jumping to conclusions, right? I love the fact that, you know I'm just gonna just add this too, but if you are experiencing paranormal or you see UAPs, you see UFOs, whatever that may be, keep a journal with you, right? Keep a small notebook. And even if you don't want to carry something around, pen and paper, if you have got your cell phone, notes on it, whatnot, just keep a running journal. If something seems not quite right, put the date, the time, describe the best you can what it is. If you have your camera and you can take a picture of it, whether it's blurry or not, do that. Keep track of that, right? Because I think that that's what we're all here together to come collectively as a community first, humanity second, to get to the answers of these. And that's what makes it so exciting. And so, again, I think the more people, like-minded people that work together to further our understanding of the nature of our reality is, our purpose, Jim, and why we have our podcast and why we are not only talking about these episodes, but digging a little bit deeper. And what is that higher meaning? What is that connection? What does that mean for us and our place in the universe?
Well said. And yeah, folks, don't get me wrong. Just because I look at it from a more open-minded, skeptical viewpoint, if aliens and extraterrestrials is what works for you, go with it. Nobody's telling you that you can't, and I'm not going to judge anybody that does. It's just simply I'm explaining how my approach and my thought process in this is. And as Roger says, we exist here with the soul of the unexplained specifically to destigmatize this whole greater realm of the unexplained because we are curious. We want to know. We want knowledge. We want to connect with other experiencers. We want to connect
Right.
with people that are legitimately out there investigating things. Um, Quite obviously, you get the whole gamut. You get people that are really, you know, in my opinion, way out in left field that get into almost quasi-religious type factions about this kind of thing, to the people that are on the extreme other end where this is all nonsense and BS. And you know, I'm of the frame of mind that there truly are extraordinary things out there that happen. I don't believe that we're alone in this universe or on this planet. And I'm not scared or intimidated by any of that. I am curious. I want to better understand all of these extraordinary phenomena and anomalies that happen. I truly, genuinely want to know. And so, folks, please let us know how you feel, not just about this episode, but anything pertaining to the topics that Roger and I cover here on the Soul of the Unexplained. Let us know in the comments section of this video. Hit us up on Facebook. Reach out to us privately on Facebook. Roger and I are both on Facebook, and the Soul of the Unexplained has a page on Facebook. So, we're open minded and we are ready to listen to anybody that has had an experience or that just wants to connect with people that are going to have a common interest in helping to figure out what some of these great mysteries are, be they on Skinwalker Ranch or anywhere else. We are, Roger and I are experiencers of uh, of the unexplained. We are experiencers of the paranormal. I wasn't before I started doing this damn podcast, but uh, so eventually, weird stuff happens to everyone, including somebody like me. Um, but when those moments happen, when you experience those things that kind of conflict with your view of reality, that conflict with your spiritual or religious views, or just your common logic just seems to defy everything that is possible if you experience anything. And again, whether we're talking like a Bigfoot or Sasquatch sighting, UFO, UAP, ghost, haunting, apparition, anything that is just strange and unusual, just know that you are not alone. There are millions of people all throughout the world, perfectly sane and rational people. Now, I'm not saying that I'm sane and rational because let's face it, folks, I am a Raiders fan. So that automatically kind of checks that box off. But in all seriousness, you know, you're not alone if you're somebody who has ever experienced truly bizarre and strange phenomena. And that's what Roger and I are here to do, is to give, to shine a light, because sunlight is the greatest disinfectant. And what you'll find, folks, if you're anything like me and Roger, is that when you talk about these things, you'll gain strength and courage from other people telling you their story, other people telling you their experiences, because that's what
Yes.
happened to me. And to know that I'm not alone, that I'm not the only one that experienced something truly unexplainable, um, helps me to reconcile and to cope, for want of a better word, with some of the things that I have experienced. And I know Roger, it's the same for you. So, folks, thank you again for tuning into the Soul of the Unexplained. Don't forget to check out J Free 906's recent episode recap of both episode 10 and 11 of The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch. And we'll put the link in the video below here. But thank you for watching this episode. Roger, thank you for joining me. I wish you a very safe travels in your journey outside of the country. And, just travel safe, and can't wait to have you back. And, folks, I'll be back next week with a recap of both The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch and Beyond Skinwalker Ranch. And like Roger says, I'm going to wrangle up some of my friends to help me out with those two recaps next week. But until then, folks, love one another, take care of one another, be nice to bunnies, right? Uh, eat
Eat
as many
tacos.
eat as many tacos as you can with lots of cilantro and onions. And yeah, if you got to do guacamole, knock yourself out, folks. But seriously, thanks, folks. And Roger and I will see you next time right here on the Soul of the Unexplained. Hit that subscribe and the like button, because, well, Roger and I, we kind of like likes. But we will see you soon, folks. See ya.